I remember being in my little security booth that night, with the surveillance camera monitors in front of me, showing every nook and cranny of the building uneventfully. My job was simple: keep watch, check the cameras, and make sure no one entered the building after hours. The hour had advanced. It was almost 2 in the morning, and I was beginning to feel the weight of fatigue. I fancied a coffee, but the damn machine on the first floor had been out of order since the afternoon. So, reluctantly, I got up and decided to go to the second floor where there was another coffee machine. I could have passed it up, but at that hour, a good coffee was all that kept me awake. I walked to the elevator, watching the cameras one last time before exiting my cabin. Everything was in order. Nothing was moving in the building. When I reached the second floor, the air was colder than I expected. I didn't think anything of it, thinking that the air conditioner was running cooler than usual. I didn't know why they left it on at that time, but hey, if those rich guys like to spend money, that's their business. I walked down the hallway until I reached the break room where the other coffee machine was waiting for me. I poured my coffee, and as I did so, something caught my attention. It was quick, like a flash in my peripheral vision. Something moved in the corner of the hallway, just at the edge of my field of vision. I turned immediately, but saw nothing. It wasn't a reflection. It wasn't an optical illusion. I felt a jolt of adrenaline, but instead of investigating, I decided to go back to my workstation. I didn't need to investigate or anything. I had cameras. Back in my booth, coffee in hand, I sat down in front of the monitors and started checking the cameras again. Part of me was hoping to see something, anything that would confirm what I had perceived. I went through the images one by one. Everything seemed in order until I came to the camera covering the hallway where I had been moments before. There I saw it. Something dark moving quickly, crawling along the floor as if it were a living shadow. I moved closer to the screen, trying to discern what I was seeing. The silhouette had no clear shape, but what disturbed me most was that there was no person or light source to justify the shadow. I checked nearby cameras, including the main entrance, and there was no one else in the building. The first thing that came to mind was that maybe there was an animal on the loose, or that an electrical panel was malfunctioning. Maybe a bird. I was curious as to what could be going on, but I wasn't going to go. I had no reason to, until I did. Suddenly, the camera cut itself, and that's something I couldn't allow during my work hours. I had to see what was happening to it. I was confident that it was just a technical problem that I could solve, or, at worst, an animal that had snuck in. I left the booth and headed back to the elevator. The building was well lit as usual, and the atmosphere, although colder than usual, did not make me suspect that anything out of the ordinary was going on. Arriving at the floor where I had seen the shadow, I paused for a moment as I stepped out of the elevator. The air was even colder than before. I didn't like it, but it wasn't enough to make me turn back. I walked down the hallway, focusing on the spot where I had seen the shadow on the camera. I looked up, searching for some crack in the ceiling, maybe a trapped bird, but there was nothing. I moved a little further and noticed something unsettling. The shadows in the hallway were moving, but not in the way they should. There was nothing casting them. I searched the ceilings, the walls, and the floor trying to find the source, but there was nothing. Suddenly, the shadows stopped. The cold got a little colder. Had the air conditioner broken down? I looked out to see what the temperature was, and there it was. The air conditioner was off. Suddenly, the lights went out all at once, leaving me in absolute darkness. My heart was pounding, but there was no time to think. I felt something close, something I couldn't see, but it was moving around me. The cold intensified, and a sharp pain shot through my body. It was as if something invisible was tearing at my skin. I touched my arm and felt the wetness of blood. The pain was very intense, and I couldn't see where it was coming from. I moved as fast as I could, staggering down the hallway in the dark, looking for a way out. I stumbled against the wall, trying to reach the emergency door, but when I pushed it, it was locked. It was impossible for it to be locked from the inside, but there was no time to think about the details. I was trapped, and I knew it. I looked down the hall, where a dim emergency light was still flickering, and there, I saw him. A dark figure, tall and distorted, began to advance toward me. He walked slowly, but with each step, The distance between us seemed to shrink by half. My body froze in terror, but my legs kept moving. I wanted to scream, but I felt like something was choking me. The figure began to run towards me. I felt the ground tremble with its footsteps. Fear completely controlled me. I was cornered. I fell to the ground and began to cry, covering my face as if that would do any good. The being was closer and closer. His footsteps were getting faster and faster, as if full of anxiety to grab me. Suddenly, when the being was next to me, the lights came back, and the figure disappeared on the spot. I gasped, still with the echoes of my scream echoing in the corridors. I thought it was safe, that whatever was attacking me was gone. I gave myself a few seconds to catch my breath, but then something invisible threw me against the wall with brutal force. I felt my bones crunch, and everything around me became a maelstrom of pain and confusion. My body was tossed back and forth like a doll, with no control over what was happening. My body fell to the floor, hitting the marble with a dry sound. I took advantage of that brief respite and ran for the elevator. Adrenaline was driving me. I didn't feel the pain I should be feeling. I pressed the button in desperation, and when the doors opened, I jumped inside. The elevator began to slowly descend, and as it went down, the temperature began to rise. This calmed me a bit, until before I knew it, it had gone way up. It was hot. Very hot. I fell to the floor and began to suffocate. The elevator was going down very slowly, much slower than usual. I started sweating and clutching my neck. I was choking. The air was boiling. I couldn't breathe. Then, out of nowhere, the elevator stopped on the first floor. When the doors opened on the first floor, I shot out without looking back. I didn't care if the camera saw me. I didn't care about anything at that moment. I just wanted to be as far away as possible. When I got to my cabin, I grabbed my jacket and my stuff. I wasn't going to stay even one more second in that place. I left the building and headed to my car, taking deep breaths as my hands shook uncontrollably. The next day, I called my boss. I didn't tell him everything that had happened. I just told him that there was a problem with the cameras and that something wasn't right in the building. We arranged to meet to review the footage. When we reviewed the cameras together, we saw something that neither of us could explain. There it was, the same shadow I had seen walking down the empty hallway. Only now, the footage cut out just as the lights failed. The images did not show what had attacked me, but the shadows were there. That same day, I resigned, and although my boss didn't quite believe me, I found out shortly after that he closed that floor. The employees were happy. Nothing had happened to anyone, but everyone had seen or felt something they shouldn't have. Hello everyone. We want to give you a quick update. As many of you have already noticed, we are uploading videos every day. But not many of you have told us that the platform doesn't notify you. So we want to remind you to turn on the bell so YouTube notifies you every time we upload a new video, so you won't miss a single one. We really appreciate your support, which helps us grow this amazing community. Your comments and likes are essential to us. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? It's free. Also, it will allow you to be an active part of this community that keeps growing day by day. On the other hand, we are excited to announce a new section in the channel called Subscribers Stories. Each month, we will release a video based on the stories you send us. Did you, a family member, or a friend have a paranormal experience you want to share? Send it to ssganimation@gmail.com, and one of our writers will work with it to turn it into a special horror episode. And speaking of our writers, don't forget to leave your questions and suggestions in the comments. They read everything and will be happy to answer them and take your ideas for future videos. Also, we are very excited to announce the launch of our SSG collaboration program. What does this mean? For a monthly subscription, you will be able to upload your videos with subtitles in the language of your choice. Would you like to grow your channel using our Spanish subtitle videos? How about French? For more information, write us here or send us an email, and we'll be happy to give you all the details. Finally, We are about to reach 150,000 subscribers. Although we still have a long way to go, we want to thank all of you from the bottom of our hearts. Those who watch our stories, those who comment, those who like, and even those who are subscribed. We made this community together, and we are sure that we will grow much more with your support.
Hi, my name is Sarah, and a couple of months ago I moved into a house I inherited from my uncle. He had passed away suddenly from a heart attack, according to the doctor. We didn't have a close relationship, but the house came at the right time. I was looking for a place to live with my boyfriend, Ben. We had grown tired of constantly renting and moving, so when the lawyer called me with the news, it seemed like a perfect solution. The house wasn't in bad shape. It had 2 floors, a fairly large garden in the back, and best of all, it was fully furnished. Despite the oldness of some of the furniture, it all looked livable with a little effort. Ben and I were planning to move in together soon, but while he was arranging to move out of the apartment, I decided to move in alone for a few days. After all, I couldn't wait. The first few nights were quiet. I stayed up late watching the series I had saved in my notebook until there was internet, unpacking boxes. By the time I went to bed, I was so tired that I fell asleep immediately. It was on the 3rd night when I noticed something strange. The doors in the house, especially the kitchen door, started banging on their own. At first, I ignored it, thinking it might be a draft. It all followed the next night when I heard the same knocking in the middle of the night. I woke up with a start, and still in my sleep, I saw something through my bedroom window. At first, I thought it was the reflection of the streetlights, but no. There was a figure. It was standing outside, staring at me. I jumped out of the bed in a second and ran to the window, but when I got there, the figure had disappeared. I stood there breathing heavily, looking for some trace in the garden. But there was no one there. The backyard was completely empty. I convinced myself that it had been a bad dream, an effect of being in a new house alone. The garden was enclosed on all sides. The walls were high, too high for anyone to climb easily, and the only way to get to the backyard was through the house itself. How was someone there, watching me? It was all a night terror for sure. The nerves from the move, the accumulated fatigue, everything had helped me to sleep too deeply. Seeing something like that was quite natural. A couple more days passed, and Ben finally arrived. I hadn't told him anything about what had happened. I didn't want to scare him with my paranoia. But when I casually mentioned the knocking on the doors, he frowned. That doesn't make sense. If there are no air currents, why would the doors move? That's when I told him about the figure in the window. I expected him to laugh, to take it as a joke, or tell me I was imagining things. But he didn't. I had forgotten that he was a coward, someone who was easily suggestible. The next few days were strange. Ben began to notice what I had been ignoring. The doors kept banging, not all the time, but enough to make us uncomfortable. And then one night, he saw it. We were in the living room watching a movie when suddenly he shot up. He looked down the hallway that connected to the kitchen, and I could tell he had gone pale. What's wrong? There, in the corner. I saw it. There was someone. You say an intruder? No. The door is next to us. Besides, that wasn't a person. It was like a shadow. I got up quickly but didn't see anything. Ben was still motionless, looking down the hallway as if he was waiting for something or someone to appear again. I approached slowly, thinking that maybe it had been his imagination, but when I reached the door, I felt something. I couldn't explain it. It wasn't cold or a change in the atmosphere, but it was as if something was watching me, as if somehow we were not alone. After that night, Ben didn't want to stay anymore. He tried to convince me that there was something in the house, but I couldn't accept it. I refused to believe that I had to leave the house. The house had come as a miracle, and I wasn't willing to lose that. I told him he was being paranoid, and that it was probably just stress. But he didn't see it that way. We had a fight, and finally, he left the house. A few days went by, and although I tried to convince myself that everything was fine, something inside me didn't feel at peace. I decided to put what was happening to the test. So one night I grabbed my phone and started recording the banging coming from the kitchen. I wanted to prove that everything had a logical explanation. Maybe I could hear better with the recording. Maybe the sound was coming from somewhere I hadn't noticed. That night the knocking was louder than ever. I walked towards the kitchen with the phone in my hand, recording everything, and just as I approached the door, I saw it. A figure standing in the hallway, still as if waiting for me. I couldn't move for a few seconds, but this time it wasn't fear. It was that thing, that shadow that stopped me. I backed away slowly, still recording, and the knocking stopped immediately. I approached the door again, and the figure was not only still in the hallway, but even closer than before. I stepped back in fear, waiting for the shadow to appear in the hallway. That's when I heard it. A noise behind me. I froze. Something was behind me. I stood still and felt a breath on the back of my neck. The shadow was no longer coming out of the door. It was behind me. I screamed. Without thinking twice, I ran towards the courtyard, the only way out that I had. Behind me, the hallway was dark for a second. The lights in the house suddenly went out, and the flower pots in the courtyard began to fall over by themselves. I could hear them breaking all around me, but I didn't dare look back. I felt something on my shoulder as if something or someone had touched me. I turned instinctively, even though I knew no one was there. I was against the wall. There couldn't be anyone there. But there was. On the wall opposite me, a shadow was beginning to form. One that belonged to nothing and no one. The shadow quickly took shape, and what I was seeing was not human. It was a tall, thin, but distorted figure, as if the darkness itself was contorting itself out of the wall. I wanted to run, but I couldn't. Something had me trapped. It wasn't fear, it was as if that thing was controlling my movements. It walked towards me, fast, and before I could react, it grabbed my head with both of its hands. The last thing I remember was the pressure, an indescribable pain. When I opened my eyes, I was still in the courtyard, lying on the ground. It was daylight. The lights in the house were still off, but the sun was beginning to rise. I felt dizzy, as if I had lost hours of my life. I checked my phone. The recording was still there, or at least part of it. What I had seen last night was not a dream. That was for sure. I called Ben immediately, begging him to come over. He arrived in a matter of minutes and, no questions asked, got me out of that house. Nothing else strange had happened while he was arriving, but my body was still shaking. I didn't know how to explain it. I didn't know if I wanted to. A couple of days later, I decided to check the videos on my phone. The recordings were still there, and when I played them back, I felt my skin crawl again. The knocking on the door was clear, still as clear as the shadow I saw that night for me. It wasn't my imagination. It wasn't a nightmare. A short time later, Ben and I parted ways. I couldn't forgive him for leaving me alone in that house, and he couldn't forgive me for putting the responsibility on him to stay in that place because of me. At this point, it didn't matter. I would never go back to that house. And you know, this made me doubt for the first time. What if my uncle didn't die of a natural death?